So today I want to talk to you about authenticity in your podcasts.
Every moment is a teachable moment.
Last week, I went to PodFest 2025 and had a great time networking and meeting new people in the podcasting space. I did a panel with my colleagues, George the Tech, George Whittam, and Jody Krangle from Audio Branding. And our panel was focused on audio excellence for your podcast. And each one of us focused on a different piece of the audio portion of your podcast for having an amazing podcast. And mine was about the voice. And I talked about how with your voice, you want to make sure that you are authentic, that you are engaging with your audience. I actually took a poll so that everybody that attended our session took this poll, and I asked them how important they thought authenticity was for the success of their podcast. And it was an overwhelming 4.85 out of 5 stars of the people who thought that authenticity was critical to the success of their podcast. When really focusing on being authentic, I think the number one tip and the number one thing that you need to know is really understand your audience. Who are you talking to? And make sure that you're talking to your audience and not necessarily reading to your audience or talking to the air. And so there's a big difference here if you have an unscripted or a scripted podcast. And there might be a hybrid of both. You could have a podcast where you're reading an introduction if you're interviewing a guest and you're reading off of a page of notes and you read verbatim, word for word, the introduction to your guest. And or if you have ads that you are reading, that you're reading word for word on the script. So if that's the case, there's going to be a big disconnect between your conversation when you're interviewing the guests and you're just having banter back and forth. And then when you go to a break or you've got that script read ad coming in there or you're reading the introduction. And so what can you do to make yourself sound more authentic and really don't have such a disconnect between your conversation and then your ad read or your introduction or your scripted notes? Well, number one, you can improv. And so if it happens to be your podcast, it's really a great thing because you're able to improv those words unless you're being paid from a sponsor to read the ad exactly the way it is. But if you're introducing a guest, you can most certainly change their bio or change their introduction into something that is a little bit less scripted and a little more authentic so it will flow more naturally into the conversation. If you are reading an ad and it's a host read ad where they've allowed you to do improv, again, that's something that you want to take the time and really look at and maybe, scribble in a few words that can add to the conversational feel of the ad. If you do have to read the ad word for word, guess what? We're going right back to our voiceover days when we are given a script that is supposed to sound conversational, but yet it's written very differently, or it's written second or third person or very selly. And so then I go back to my practices as a voice actor. I, again, know who I am, who I'm talking to, and then I really try to create that conversation and make sure that I'm directing that conversation to the person rather than just reading in a particular melody. I actually found it to be very helpful to have a class on improv, to really focus in on those lessons from your coach that are talking about how do I take this script and make it sound conversational. As a matter of fact, I even have a small mini course that's called Better Ad Reads. So those of you out there that have a podcast and you want help in sounding more authentic, sounding more conversational, you can certainly take a look at that on my website at annganguza.com. But really, never forget that you're talking to your audience. And even if you're reading off a piece of paper, make sure that you're establishing that conversation back and forth so that it doesn't sound like you're reading an ad the way you think it should sound. And it's more like a conversation that you're having with your listener. So for more performance tips, make sure to check out my videos here. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next week.